Mimecast, welcome aboard. Take the stage.
Great. Well, these lights are bright. Well, first of all, thank you. You've chosen the right session. I mean, email security is far more exciting than GDPR, surely. Yeah, no, it's great to be here today. My intention today is to talk a little bit about the changing threat landscape. Some of it, well, I know definitely some of it is not going to be new, but maybe sort of just give some new insights and thoughts around things. But then talk a little bit more about the fact that email security is important, any security is important, but protection alone is no longer the right strategy. In that protection is important, but in this day and age, you've got to be thinking about not if, but when. So having a more robust strategy around what happens if something does go wrong. Am I stuck without a plan, or do I have a plan B? So just to start off, attackers come in all different shapes and sizes. We've spoken this morning about sort of nation-state attacks, or sort of organized groups of attackers, whether they're looking to gain some sort of political kind of or sort of put across some sort of political message, get some sort of other type of gain, or individuals who either have some sort of vendetta, just doing it for fun, but ultimately what we see in all the attacks, whether it's individuals or groups, is most of them are driven by cash. They're trying to make money. That was sort of trying, everything from stealing credentials, stealing data, trying to sell it on the black market. More recently, that's shifted to attacks like ransomware that we've talked about quite a bit today already. But Bitcoin has certainly been a key driver for that as well. It certainly makes it a lot simpler, a lot easier for attackers to get the money and to get away with that without getting caught. It's not just about external attackers either. Increasingly, insider threats. Most of the time, it's not malicious. Most of the time, it's a compromised insider. Somebody's been phished. They've had their credentials stolen. Those credentials are then being used to try and spread further inside that organization. Having said that, there are also malicious insiders that you have to be aware of as well. But you may or may not have realized, but still today, 9 out of 10 breaches actually start in email, specifically with a phish, actually. But that has expanded to other sort of attack types as well. But still, 90% of all attacks come through email, and ultimately that's because we all still use it. As much as people have been talking about the death of email for almost over a decade, I would say, it's still around. It's actually growing. If you look at the latest stats on it, it is still growing. So each year, more and more of us are using email as a key communication tool, both in our personal lives and for work. And we place an inherent trust in email. Again, we heard a little bit about human nature this morning, but we do put a lot of trust in it, especially when a mail looks to come from somebody we know. And we all lead very, very busy lives. Sometimes we don't have the time to really start looking into, well, it looks like it's come from Bob or Tim or whoever. Has it really come from them? Probably the questions we should be asking, but who's got the time for that? So you might, looks like we've all some of us have sourced our imagery from the same place. I've added a couple of nice little social media icons around mine. But social engineering through email, we've seen a significant rise in socially engineered attacks, to the point where they don't necessarily need to even contain any malware at all. We heard this morning from Jessica about sort of social engineering and sort of business email compromise, where there may well be no attachment, there may be no malicious link that they're trying to get you to click on, just purely using social engineering. And quite a lot of the time, there's they crafted quite carefully. There's some sort of emotive language. It's addressed to you. It looks like it's come from somebody senior, whether that's your boss, whether that's the CEO, something like that. Ultimately, all designed to try and get you to do something, whether it's opening the attachment, clicking the link, performing some sort of instruction that the attacker has put in the email. Again, a lot of people think, well, my business is not overly that interesting. We don't hold, a lot of intellectual property, or we don't hold a lot of customer data and things like that. But we see all different types of companies being breached, and quite often they are not the ultimate target, if you like, with the majority being used to get to the ultimate target. So you may only be a stepping stone, you may be collateral damage, but that doesn't mean that certainly you're not immune, and equally it can have a pretty devastating impact on your business at the same time. So attacks are becoming more and more targeted. There are still sort of broad attacks. I had one the other day from the HMRC, the tax office in the UK, saying that they were going to give me some money back on my tax, trying to get me to click through. About a week later, I had an email from them to say, you may have had an email. It didn't come from us. Hopefully, you didn't click on anything. Don't trust anything that doesn't look like this, and all that kind of stuff. But attackers are doing their research, and they're getting their information from a lot of different sources. So this is this is from our own website, the Mimecast website. These are some of our C-level execs at Mimecast, and attackers are using a lot of different sources from your company website. I think pretty much every company has got a page like this. You've got photos of your leaders, their roles, their social media details, where they used to work, all that type of stuff. Attackers can start using that to build up a very accurate picture and organizational structure to be able to better target their attacks. They'll start here, they'll then go to LinkedIn, they can start researching our CEO, Peter Bauer. They can see where he's come from, who he's connected to, who's recommended him on LinkedIn, so who he has a good relationship with, and very quickly start building up that picture of who they want to go after and how best they're going to get to that person. To be able to launch an email attack, you need an email address. But again, you don't need to necessarily guess the address or even know the address for the business that you're looking to target, because pretty easily online you can find directories like this where you can type in a company name and it'll give you the way that they structure their email addresses. So very easy to build up your list, if you like, for actually launching an attack as well. I don't know why these slides are flipping forward one, but bear with me. I am only clicking once, I promise. Interestingly as well, think about where else an attacker can go to find information that is going to help them with an attack. And one that I hadn't really thought of much before a little while back is think about the information about your organization that's in the public domain. So, there's in different countries, for example, in the UK, there's an organization called Companies House. Any public organization has their details published on Companies House. Or if you're a public business, through your filings online, attackers can, for example, see who are your accountants, who are your auditors. Now you think about how is that useful? Well, if I'm launching a socially engineered attack and I'm going to target my attack, I've done my research, I know who the CFO is, and I'm going to send a very targeted email to the CFO with a very cleverly crafted email looking like it's come from that organization's auditors. It's highly likely that the CFO is going to open the mail. If there's an attachment, they're going to open the attachment to see what their auditors are sending them. So again, there's a huge amount of information available very, very freely, very easily to build up their knowledge and to be able to mount very targeted, very sophisticated attacks. We've heard a little bit about impersonation attacks already today. They go by all sorts of different names. It could be impersonation, they're sometimes called whaling, business email compromise, W-2 fraud. So W-2s in the US are sort of the your personal tax statement for the year, etc. But the one thing they have in common is most often they don't contain any malware. So it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, for traditional defenses to actually detect and stop these types of attacks. There's no URL to scan, there's no attachment to sandbox. All there is an email with text in it. So how do you protect against that? This is an example, and I'm not sure if it's big enough on the screens here, but this is actually an example that our finance department received, where it's an email that was targeting somebody within our finance team, making it look like it's come from our finance CFO, Peter Campbell, and it's basically asking typically for a money transfer. As I said, we heard a little bit about this from Jessica this morning, where very well social engineered attacks. Quite often they'll know when the CFO is traveling because he's put some sort of update on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn. It might be a Friday afternoon. The email might say, hey, I'm just about to jump on an airplane. I've been negotiating a new acquisition, merger, whatever. I need you to transfer some funds. Don't tell anybody, and it's super urgent. I need this done yesterday. It's kind of, it's very compelling. And in this case, it looks like it's come from the email address of our CFO. But actually, if you look very carefully, what the attacker has done in this case is they've substituted an R and an N for an M in Mimecast. So to the naked eye, when you're looking at it very quickly, it looks like an M, but it's actually a lowercase R and an N. And unless you look very carefully, you're not going to spot that. So again, it looks like it's come from the right person. I'm going to trust this email. And if you don't have the right kind of processes in place to prevent transfer of money, especially over a certain sum outside of the company, then this may well cause a significant issue. This type of attack is going absolutely crazy. So this is a report that the FBI published only a few days ago, and over 2,300% spike from January 15 to January 16 in this type of attack. Over 5 billion in losses associated with this attack. We heard about the Bangladeshi bank example, 80 million. There's a lot more like that. Not all as big, but there's enough of them to get to a figure like 5 billion in losses. And this is a global problem. It's not just a US issue. It's not just a European issue. It's everywhere. Ransomware, I guess, sort of topic of the week. Why is ransomware getting so much bigger? I just like using this graphic to the jigsaw variant of ransomware you may be familiar with, but so I find it quite menacing. But ransomware is increasing exponentially as well. And although last week's attack at the moment, there is nothing indicating that last week's WannaCry attack used email. There's no smoking email that they found as yet. But in the vast majority of cases, ransomware attacks use email. In most instances, an email attachment to be able to actually infiltrate an organization and actually drop the malware behind the firewall onto their network. It's a $1 billion business and growing. It's significant. I like the fact that the FBI refer to it as a business because that's how attackers see it. They're making an investment either in money or just their time, and they want to see a return. And the return on investment that you get from a ransomware attack is often very healthy, and that's why they do it. What we've seen as well is ransomware moving from targeting sort of individual clients, individual machines, to targeting more extensive infrastructure. It's shifting from client to server. Not difficult to understand why. The more pain you can cause somebody, the more likely they are to pay up. and I know we've spoken about it today. I'm not going to go into it, but last week's attack is a great example. It might not have been intentionally targeted at the NHS, but the impact that it had on the UK health system was dramatic. Last week, you had operations being cancelled. People can't go into to hospitals. Ambulances are being diverted from one hospital to another. Potentially putting lives at risk. That is a significant impact on critical infrastructure. One of the reasons I see this type of attack really growing is the barrier to entry is coming lower. So you don't even need to know how to code. You can get buy ransomware as a service. This is an example of a ransomware kit that you can buy pretty easily on the web. Increasingly, you don't even have to pay anything up front. So you can access this. You can access malware to use in your campaign, and you'll do a profit sharing arrangement with the malware writers. That you'll take a share of the profits. So there's no upfront outlay. It's very easy. They'll even give you a nice sort of interface that you can see. Okay, how many people have I hit? How many people have paid the ransom? All of that kind of thing. It's pretty professional. Even if you do know how to code, do you know how to bypass things like sandboxes? Again, you don't need to know how to do that. You can buy a service online that does that for you. It'll crypt your mail. That you're using to deliver that ransomware so that it can evade detection from sandboxes, for example. I quite like the fact on this one that they say it's almost got like a money-back guarantee. So if it doesn't work, if it stops working, they'll redo it for you. I thought that was very kind of them. Certainly at Mimecast, we see a lot of email every day. We process over 600 million mails a day on behalf of our customers. And just in the recent past, we've seen 50% of the malware that we've blocked is just one variant, Locky variant of ransomware. So this is a very pervasive issue. We have customers right across all different industries, all different company sizes, and it doesn't target one over another at all. Obviously, if it's targeting a much bigger organization, the ransomware demand is going to be bigger. So, how do we defend against these types of attacks? And certainly, there is a significant role that technology can play. And I wanted to talk about a few things around both protection, but also how do you go further of just trying to stop stuff? Because we have pretty effective, if you've got the right email security, for example, most attacks coming through email, if you have the right email security, it's going to be very effective in stopping these attacks. However, there's no guarantee that something at some point is not going to get through. The attackers are getting smarter and smarter. So different precautions that you can take, for example, around URL rewriting, especially with phishing attacks. The main aim is to trick users into clicking on a link that's going to take them to a site that's going to get them to put in their credentials. They'll then use those credentials to gain further and higher up access within the organization to ultimately get to the most valuable information that they can. So ultimately, URL rewriting is what you want, so that every time somebody clicks on a link, not just when it comes through the gateway initially, but every single time somebody clicks on it, whether it's from their desktop or whether it's from their mobile device, that link is scanned in real time to check if that site is still safe. Attachments I've spoken about as a key way that ransomware is coming into organizations. Sandboxing is certainly a good level of defense. However, it does have its drawbacks. It does delay email delivery, but also it's not infallible. There are ways to get around it. So ideally having multi-layered attachment protection is best practice. So a sandbox, and then to give you an example, what we provide for our customers is a safe file conversion option. So when an email comes in with an attachment, for example, a Word document, will take that Word document and convert it into a safe PDF format, and that is delivered instantly with no delay. But it also means that any malware that may have been in that attachment is rendered useless, is rendered benign. So a safe attachment to employees with no delay. Impersonation protection, I see as a must, and certainly, there is protection available, even though there is no malware. So, for example, at Mimecast, we offer a specific module to our customers specifically for impersonation attacks, where we're looking at a number of different indicators of compromise, everything from domain name spoofing, display name spoofing, the reputation and details of when the domain was registered that is trying to attack you. What we see quite often is that domains are registered only very shortly before attack is carried out. So we can detect that, even right down to keywords as well. So quite often we see these types of attacks have specific keywords, things like money transfer and things like that in the content itself. From a continuity point of view, really, what I wanted to get across here is, at some point, something may get through. Do you have a plan so that you can continue operating? The last thing you want is to revert to pen and paper. So, for example, from an email point of view, can you continue operating? Can your employees continue using email even if your primary system is unavailable or needs to be shut down? And from a recovery point of view, naturally having your data backed up and ideally having your operational data and backup data in separate environments, not only to try and protect against, if your primary data is encrypted, for example, with ransomware, the last thing you want is that to move to your backup. So that's key as well. And importantly, not all security solutions can do this. What I wanted to mention, and we've got this report on our stand outside. You can come and grab a copy, but we're actually able to come into your organization and take a journal copy of your mail and be able to report back on what your current email security solution is not catching. It may be doing really well, it may not be. How do you know? So we were able to deliver a report. As I said, we've got an example, an aggregated report outside that you can grab on this as well. The last thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm conscious of time, is what I will refer to as herd alertness. And this is what Jessica was speaking about this morning.
I am so sorry, Dan, but they're actually telling me to cut you off. So please
have
round it up.
Have I been speaking for that long?
Yes, yes, you have. So give them a last something, and then we're going to cut this.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to flick through all of this, but okay, so final message, I guess, is protection is important. You've got to have the best protection in place that you possibly can. However, you've got to have a plan B. I wouldn't be very confident standing up in front of the board and saying, we're not going to get breached. I think in this day and age, you have to assume you are going to get breached, and what plan B do you have to be able to continue operating and to be able to recover to a known good state?
Sounds good. Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.